The world is quiet when you listen far enough back. Before history, before language, before memory, there was only the slow breathing of the planet. Continents drifted like sleeping giants. Mountains rose and were ground to dust again. Oceans advanced and retreated in patient rhythms, each cycle erasing what the previous one built. To the rocks, time does not pass, it accumulates. Every layer of sediment is a page in an endless book written in heat, pressure, and silence. If we could read that book with perfect clarity, we might find that its story is older and stranger than we imagine, a story that does not begin with us. Humanity measures time in heartbeats and histories, but Earth keeps its own calendar, epics carved by catastrophe, chapters turned by fire and flood. In that deeper chronology, the last 10,000 years, the span we call civilization, barely fills a margin note. And yet within that blink, we have risen from stone tools to spacecraft, from whispers around campfires to digital archives orbiting above the clouds. Such speed defies the rhythm of nature. It feels accelerated, as if we stumbled onto a path already paved. For most of our history, we assumed this acceleration was unique, a triumph of evolution, a lucky alignment of climate, cognition, and chance. But beneath the surface of that story, another possibility stirs. What if we are not the first? What if others, long before us, climbed the same fragile ladder of knowledge, only to fall, leaving behind traces so faint that we mistake them for coincidence? The Earth is very good at forgetting. In the span of a few million years, rain, erosion, and plate tectonics can erase mountains. In tens of millions, entire continents rearrange themselves. Anything built by fragile hands would vanish long before the present day. And yet, absence is not proof of non-existence. Sometimes it is simply the weight of time doing what it always does, covering everything in silence. Scientists call this the Silurian hypothesis, the idea that another technological civilization could have existed on Earth millions of years ago, and we would almost never know. It sounds like science fiction, but it is a serious question asked by serious minds. Because when you examine the geological record, you find patterns, sudden changes in temperature, chemical imbalances in sediment, isotope anomalies, that could, in theory, be the signatures of industrial activity. Each could have natural explanations, but taken together, they hum with quiet suggestion. The planet itself seems to remember more than we do. Its memory is stored not in words but in chemistry, layers of carbon, spikes of heavy metals, isotopic scars left by energy unleashed and then forgotten. If another species once mastered fire, industry, or atomic force, the proof would not be buildings or bones, but ratios, traces buried in stone. We already see such marks from our own age, plastic polymers in the deep sea, radioactive isotopes in polar ice, fossil fuel residues in every layer of soil. These will persist for tens of millions of years, long after our cities crumble. To a future intelligence, they will look like faint signals from a vanished culture. So when geologists find older signals, unexplained deposits, sudden atmospheric changes, extinctions that happen too fast for natural causes, the question is worth asking. Are we seeing the scars of nature alone, or the echoes of someone who came before? The oldest rocks on Earth have survived nearly 4 billion years. They have seen oceans form, freeze, and boil away again. They have watched continents collide and tear apart like drifting ice sheets. They have witnessed 5 mass extinctions and countless smaller resets. If intelligence has ever arisen here before, its monuments are dust, but its consequences might remain. Imagine a civilization existing 50 million years ago, long before primates, when mammals were still learning to walk upright. Its cities might have risen on continents that no longer exist. Its power grids and machines would have turned to rust and clay. Its bones, crushed by pressure, would leave no fossils distinguishable from nature. But its energy use, its chemistry, could have altered the planet's atmosphere, leaving behind subtle signals still detectable today. We already know that such global signatures are possible because we are making one right now. In less than 2 centuries, industrial humanity has shifted the carbon composition of the atmosphere faster than any event in geological history, except for asteroid impacts and massive volcanic outbursts. The chemical fingerprint of our existence will endure long after the last trace of our species is gone. And so, we must ask, if we can do this in 2 centuries, what might have been done in 2 million years? There are hints scattered through myth and stone, stories of floods that erased worlds, of gods who descended with light and fire, of golden ages when knowledge was vast and effortless. For centuries we treated these as legends, metaphors for morality, or cycles of human folly. But sometimes myth is the shadow of memory. Across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, the same pattern repeats: creation, ascendance, hubris, destruction, rebirth. It is the rhythm of intelligence itself, to rise, to fall, and to rise again. Modern science tells us that Homo sapiens appeared roughly 300,000 years ago, but complex behavior, art, agriculture, architecture only blossomed in the last fraction of that time. Before that, for nearly 3 million years, our ancestors lived almost unchanged. Then, suddenly, everything accelerated. Language, fire, tools, trade, all within a geological blink. Some researchers call this the Great Leap Forward. Others see it as the beginning of a repeating pattern, a spark relit from an older flame. If the Earth has indeed seen civilizations rise and vanish before, the pattern is not random. It is cyclical, a heartbeat across deep time. Extinction clears the slate, life recovers, experiments again, and once more, intelligence emerges, like a melody returning to its refrain. Each time, the tempo changes, but the song remains the same. The rocks remember. The myths remember. And perhaps in some quiet way, we remember too, in the stories we tell about Atlantis, about lost golden ages, about forgotten gods who once walked among us. Maybe those are not fantasies. Maybe they are inherited memories, encoded in the collective imagination, passed down like genetic fragments of fear and awe. When you look at Earth from orbit, you see no borders, no cities, no traces of the brief civilizations that claim it. Only swirls of blue, white, and green, an ancient planet pretending to be young. But under that surface lies a memory billions of years deep. And somewhere within that memory might lie the faint, forgotten echo of another mind that once looked at the same stars and wondered if it, too, was alone. The Earth doesn't answer. It only turns, slow, patient, eternal. But if you listen closely, sometimes you can almost hear the past breathing. The deeper you look into time, the more it dissolves. 1,000 years become an afternoon. 1,000,000 fade like a breath against glass. What remains are only hints, shadows pressed into stone, the faint geometry of what used to live. If consciousness once lit this planet before us, its memory would now be a geological rumor. To imagine that is to stretch thought beyond comfort. Our sense of history depends on evidence that survives long enough for us to find it. Yet, survival itself is an exception, not a rule. Most species, most cultures, most ideas vanish without witnesses. Even the ruins we romanticize, pyramids, temples, cities carved into rock, are dust motes in Earth's patience. Stone endures only by accident. In geology, absence is common. Entire continents have vanished, swallowed by plate subduction, melted and reforged beneath volcanic plains. Ocean floors are born and destroyed every 200 million years. The surface of the world is not a museum, it is a recycling system. Whatever was once written upon it is constantly being rewritten. Time is the author that edits without mercy. And still, we assume the story begins with us. It's a comforting illusion, one born of survival. We see ourselves as the culmination of chance, a fragile species that outwitted extinction long enough to build telescopes and symphonies. But what if we are simply the latest verse in an older song? What if intelligence is not a singular event, but a natural consequence of complexity, a pattern that emerges wherever there is enough time and enough chaos to refine it? Life has had that time and that chaos in abundance. From the first microbial mats 3.5 billion years ago to the great Cambrian explosion of forms, evolution has tested every imaginable experiment. Among those experiments, self-awareness may have appeared more than once, and if it did, each incarnation would have looked upon the world as we do, believing itself alone. The fossil record hides more than it reveals. Soft-bodied organisms rarely fossilize. Entire ecosystems can vanish without trace. Even within our own epoch, only a tiny fraction of species are preserved. So why would we expect an ancient intelligence, perhaps not even human in form, to have left a clear record after tens of millions of years of erosion, pressure, and metamorphosis? Our inability to see them may say less about their absence and more about the blindness of our instruments. When paleontologists drill cores into the seabed, they sometimes find anomalies, thin layers enriched with iridium, soot, or rare isotopes, signatures of sudden planet-wide change. Usually, these are explained by meteor impacts or volcanic cataclysms. But consider the Anthropocene layer we are now creating. Carbon spikes, plastic polymers, synthetic isotopes. If a future geologist found such a layer with no context, how would they interpret it? Perhaps as a brief fever in the planet's metabolism, an unnatural warming, a surge of exotic chemistry. Then silence. Exactly the kind of layer we find in the deep past, the Ordovician extinction, the Permian, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Each event shows a sharp rise in greenhouse gases, an oxygen crash, and a mass die-off. Each is followed by a long recovery and the evolution of new life. Natural causes, yes, but indistinguishable in their chemical footprint from industrial catastrophe. If one of those pulses was born of intelligence, the evidence would look precisely like geology. To accept that possibility is not to indulge fantasy. It is to acknowledge scale. 50 million years is enough time for continents to drift apart, for mountains to erode into plains, for every artifact of civilization to be crushed into atoms. It is also enough time for evolution to begin again, clean slate, new experiment. The planet forgets us, not because it hates memory, but because forgetting is its design. There is humility in that realization. Our skyscrapers, our networks, our archives, all of it depends on continuity. Yet continuity is the rarest thing in nature. We think we are recording history, but we are writing on water. The next cycle will read nothing of us except chemistry. And still we build. Still we ask questions. Still we search the strata for others who might have asked before. Perhaps that search is instinctive. Perhaps every intelligence that arises learns too late that it was not the first to wonder. The drive to leave a mark becomes the drive to find one. In the dust of Mars, we look for signs of past water, past life, past minds. But the first alien civilization we discover may not be on another planet at all. It may be buried beneath our feet. Imagine standing on the edge of a desert at dawn. The wind uncovers the outline of something vast beneath the sand, angles too straight to be random, curvature too deliberate to be chance. It is not a building, but an impression of one, long dissolved. For a moment, light and shadow conspire to make it real again. Then the wind changes, and the illusion is gone. That is what evidence looks like at the scale of deep time. Glimpses, not monuments. Even our myths hint at such glimpses. They speak of teachers who came from the sea, of fire stolen from the gods, of floods that wiped the slate clean. Perhaps those stories began as memories, retold until they became metaphor. Maybe we are the children of survivors who themselves were the children of survivors, each remembering less than the last. The Sumerians wrote that kingship descended from heaven after a great flood. The Maya described worlds that had risen and fallen before theirs. In Hindu cosmology, the universe passes through infinite cycles of creation and destruction, each called a kalpa, each as long as the life of a god. And in nearly every tradition, there is a warning. The end always comes not with malice, but with repetition. The world forgets and begins again. Science and myth diverge in method, but perhaps not in motive. Both are attempts to reconstruct what was lost. Both are acts of faith that truth leaves residue. When we look at our own civilization, with its towers of data and its oceans of waste, we are also leaving residue. We are building the next layer of mystery. If others come after, they will ask the same question we are asking now. Were we alone? And the planet, true to form, will offer them the same answer it gives us, silence shaped like a story. It is strange comfort that forgetting and remembering are the same process, viewed from opposite ends. To us, the past fades into myth. To the future, our myth will become the past. The symmetry is perfect, only the names change. And so the first part of this story ends as it began, with quiet. A silence not empty, but waiting. Waiting for us to dig deeper, to turn the next page of the geological library and see what else the Earth has tried, and lost, and might try again. Because deep time has room for many civilizations, and we, perhaps, are only the most recent line in its unfinished script. Every civilization leaves a footprint, not in monuments, not in language, but in matter. The ground beneath our feet is an archive written in minerals and isotopes, its pages measured not in years but in kilometers. Each layer of rock is a sentence, each fossil a word in a story so vast it dwarfs imagination. The Earth remembers in pressure and heat. To a geologist, the planet is less an object and more a living chronicle, a restless memory that keeps rewriting itself while keeping the faint outline of what came before. Sediment falls, ash settles, oceans rise, mountains erode. The layers compress like pages bound together by time. Inside those pages are clues, signatures of chemistry that whisper about climates, oceans, atmospheres, and the pulse of life. If intelligence has visited this planet before, its evidence would live there, not in artifacts, but in anomalies. When researchers drill into the Antarctic ice sheets, they extract cores older than our species. Each centimeter holds a season, each meter a millennium. Tiny bubbles trap air from worlds long gone, snapshots of atmosphere frozen in transparency. From these bubbles, scientists read the composition of gases, tracing the rhythm of carbon, oxygen, methane. And sometimes those rhythms falter. They spike or crash without obvious cause. Sudden warming, unnatural acceleration, an entire planet coughing and then clearing its throat. The same pattern appears in ocean sediments. Core samples from the deep seabed reveal chemical scars, thin bands enriched with nickel, chromium, or radioactive isotopes not naturally abundant. We explain them with volcanoes or impacts. But what if one such event was neither? What if one of those spikes marks an era when technology, not tectonics, altered the world? To explore that idea, scientists look for signatures that nature rarely makes on its own. Highly processed metals, complex polymers, isotopic ratios that suggest industrial refining. In our own time, such traces are everywhere. Aluminum alloys, synthetic nitrogen from fertilizers, artificial radionuclides from nuclear testing. These materials will persist long after our ruins collapse. In 10 million years, the Great Pyramids will be dust. The isotopes from our reactors will still be detectable in rock. So imagine turning that analysis backward. If some ancient species harnessed energy the way we do, through combustion, metallurgy, or nuclear reaction, it too would have left scars. But finding them would be like finding fingerprints on melted glass. Erosion blurs everything. Metamorphism, the transformation of rock under heat and pressure, scrambles the evidence into abstraction. We are looking for ghosts inside a moving wall. And yet, a few places stand out. In Gabon, Africa, geologists discovered something astonishing, a natural nuclear reactor, 2 billion years old. In the Oklo region, uranium deposits once sustained self-sustaining fission reactions moderated by groundwater. For decades, it was considered a rare geological coincidence, proof that physics can mimic industry. But when news first broke in the 1970s, some researchers asked an uncomfortable question: how could such precise conditions occur by chance? The ratios of isotopes were eerily similar to those found in human reactors. The energy release was contained. Even the burn patterns followed a stable chain reaction over hundreds of thousands of years. It was natural, yes, but suspiciously perfect. The Oklo discovery does not prove intelligence before us, but it proves something else. that the line between nature and technology is thinner than we think. That the Earth can, under the right conditions, imitate design. And if that is true, then design itself may sometimes hide behind geology, disguised as coincidence. Elsewhere, in ancient coal seams, researchers have found microscopic spheres of pure carbon, magnetized and evenly distributed, as if melted, cooled, and dispersed by uniform heat. We attribute these to lightning strikes, volcanic activity, or asteroid impacts. But to those who study industrial residues, they look hauntingly familiar, byproducts of high-temperature combustion like those produced by modern furnaces. If an earlier species had learned to burn carbon, even briefly, this is what their ashes might look like after 50 million years of weathering. Even magnetic orientation in rock tells a story. Every time molten material cools, iron grains align with the planet's magnetic field. By mapping these orientations across strata, geophysicists can reconstruct the slow waltz of continents. But in a few places there are abrupt deviations, localized shifts that do not match the global reversal timeline. The cause is unclear. Some suggest lightning, some impact, others industrial-level heating, the kind only possible when vast energy is unleashed in a single area. No one can prove it, but the pattern exists. If we were to vanish tomorrow, our industrial epoch would appear to future geologists as a razor-thin line of oddities, a layer rich in carbon soot, rare earth metals, nitrates, and synthetics. It would look like a fever mark on the Earth's pulse. To read such a mark from 50 million years ago would be to suspect a fever once before, one that broke and healed and was forgotten. It is important to remember that nature itself can produce many of these signs. Volcanoes can mimic smog, impacts can mimic nuclear winter, algae blooms can mimic chemical pollution. But when patterns overlap, when multiple anomalies converge at the same geologic horizon, the probability of coincidence narrows. Then, the planet begins to sound less like chaos and more like memory. Take, for example, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, roughly 56 million years ago. Global temperatures rose by up to 8 degrees in less than 20,000 years. Carbon dioxide spiked, oceans acidified, life suffered, then recovered. No asteroid, no supervolcano, only a mysterious abrupt release of carbon. It could have been methane hydrate release, or it could have been something else, something with intent. If a species had industrialized during that age, they would have lived among tropical forests and inland seas. They would have built cities of wood and stone, easily lost, their metallurgy, their plastics, their monuments, gone. But the warming they triggered would remain. The signature would be nearly identical to ours. And that, in the geological record, is exactly what we see. A brief, unnatural heat, then the slow sigh of recovery. This is why geologists now speak of the Earth as a system of echoes. Every layer is an echo of stress, climate, chemistry, catastrophe. By listening to the pattern of those echoes, we can tell when something unusual happened. The planet keeps no secrets, but it keeps its explanations vague. It offers evidence, never confession. To read the geological library properly, one must think in scales beyond human comprehension. We measure days, years, and decades. The Earth measures in revolutions of continents. A single chapter in its book can span 50 million years, and between each sentence lie epochs of silence. Yet within those silences, something may have stirred, risen, fallen, erased. Imagine holding a cross-section of the planet in your hand, layers upon layers of compressed time. Within one, a faint streak of soot. Within another, a spike of iridium. Within another, a subtle shift in oxygen isotopes. To the untrained eye, it is meaningless. To the geologist, it is a whisper. Something happened here. Our own age will one day form its own band, the Anthropocene. Future eyes may look at that layer and wonder who we were, what we believed, how we vanished. Perhaps they will ask the same question we are asking now, only inverted. Could there have been others before them? That is the paradox of deep time. The further you look, the more you see yourself reflected. The layers do not just record events, they mirror the mind that studies them. When we search for ancient intelligence, we are also searching for our own impermanence. The strata become both evidence and epitaph. Every civilization, if given enough time, becomes sediment. But before it does, it leaves behind a pattern, a brief distortion in nature's handwriting. We are learning to read those distortions, line by line, grain by grain. And what they seem to say, softly, across millions of years, is that we may not be the first to leave them. The Earth's book is not finished. Each new discovery turns another page. Somewhere within its endless chapters, there may be a forgotten preface, one that begins not with "once upon a time," but with something far older. Once again. The Earth has never been gentle. It gives, and then it takes, in cycles so vast that what feels like apocalypse to us is simply rhythm to it. Every few tens of millions of years, the planet inhales destruction and exhales rebirth. Species vanish, climates collapse, oceans retreat or rise until they swallow mountains. What looks like chaos is actually continuity, a kind of violent grace that resets the board for life to try again. To live on this planet is to exist on borrowed calm. Beneath the thin crust we walk upon, molten rock churns, restless and alive. The continents glide atop it like rafts over fire. The atmosphere, delicate and temporary, shields us not from death, but from awareness of how easily it comes. We have mistaken stability for safety. The rocks know better. Scientists catalog these resets like recurring storms in a cosmic weather log. There have been at least 5 mass extinctions so far, each rewriting the rules of evolution. The Ordovician, the Devonian, the Permian, the Triassic, the Cretaceous, 5 intervals when nearly everything died and everything that remained was changed forever. And between them, smaller cataclysms, each erasing progress like a tide erases footprints. It is not the exceptions that define Earth's history. It is the resets. When the Permian extinction struck 250 million years ago, over 90% of marine species vanished. Land life barely clung to existence. Volcanoes in what is now Siberia burned for millions of years, spewing carbon dioxide and methane, acidifying oceans, choking skies. It was as if the planet had decided to start over. And it did. 50 million years later, the Triassic gave rise to the dinosaurs, creatures that would dominate for twice as long as mammals have existed. Their reign, too, ended in fire. An asteroid or comet 6 miles wide struck the Yucatan, releasing energy equal to billions of atomic bombs. For months the world burned. For years it froze. For centuries it forgot. And then, out of the ashes, mammals emerged. They filled the void left behind, small, nocturnal, opportunistic. From those survivors came us. The story feels linear, but it isn't. Each extinction is both ending and rehearsal. Evolution writes the same play with different actors. Every catastrophe leaves behind the tools for the next beginning. If civilizations before ours existed, they too would have lived within this rhythm. Their rise, no matter how brilliant, would have met the same inevitability: fire, flood, or freeze. No technology can outlast a billion years of geology. Even we, with satellites and nuclear vaults, cannot guarantee the survival of a single library past the next supervolcano. Time erases everything, except the pattern. In the Indian Ocean, the crust hides a mystery. Beneath layers of basalt lies Mauritius, the fragment of a vanished continent torn away during the breakup of Gondwana. It sank beneath waves tens of millions of years ago, its mountains ground into sand. Only zircon crystals older than the surrounding rock remain, tiny survivors of a lost world. If a civilization had stood there, its cities are now coral reefs. No one will ever know. The same story repeats in the Mediterranean. During the Messinian salinity crisis 6 million years ago, the sea evaporated almost entirely. For hundreds of thousands of years, the basin was a desert deeper than Death Valley. Rivers carved canyons into the seafloor. Then, in a single cataclysmic event, the Atlantic broke through the Strait of Gibraltar, refilling the basin in a flood beyond imagining. 1,000 times more water than all the rivers on Earth poured in at once, carving scars still visible from space. If anything lived or built along those vanished shores, it was obliterated in an afternoon. And still, the planet continued. Each flood, each fire, each collapse created the conditions for new life. Extinction and creation are the same process viewed from opposite ends. The Earth's cruelty is not personal, it is evolutionary. To reset is to renew. But there are disasters that feel deliberate, as if nature itself resists complexity when it grows too proud. Every time intelligence emerges, entropy waits. Volcanoes erupt, climates swing, seas consume the land. Perhaps it is not punishment, but balance, the universe redistributing order before it stagnates. In that sense, catastrophe is cosmic mercy. Consider the Toba eruption 74,000 years ago. A supervolcano in Indonesia released more than 2,000 cubic kilometers of ash and gas. For years, sunlight dimmed, global temperatures dropped, humanity nearly vanished. Genetic studies show that our ancestors were reduced to perhaps a few thousand breeding individuals, a population smaller than a modern village. Every human alive today descends from those survivors. We are, by genetic measure, a single family who once passed through fire. If there were others, other species, other cultures, they did not make it through. The bottleneck erased diversity not just of biology, but of memory. Perhaps this is how history ends each time, not with conquest, but with coincidence. A storm, a fault line, a spark from the sky. And what remains is not knowledge, but instinct, a residue of fear, a myth retold until its meaning blurs. The flood becomes divine, the fire becomes judgment, the survivors become prophets. In that sense, religion might be the oldest geological record of all. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's first written stories, tells of a flood that covered the world. So does Genesis. So do the legends of the Hopi, the Mayans, the Polynesians, and the Dogon. Every continent remembers drowning. Every culture remembers beginning again, perhaps because they did, or because their ancestors did, long before words. When we read these myths, we see metaphors for renewal, but the planet reads them differently, as field notes of trauma. Every few millennia, something resets the clock. Glacial collapse, impact, solar flare, nuclear fire. History contracts and memory becomes allegory. Even today, we live under that shadow. Our technology buys us comfort, not immunity. One eruption, one asteroid, one miscalculation, and we, too, will become rumor. The cycles of fire and flood are not limited to Earth. Across the cosmos, planetary systems form and destroy themselves in endless repetition. Stars flare and die, galaxies collide, habitable worlds flicker into being and vanish. Intelligence, wherever it arises, must contend with that rhythm. Perhaps that is why the sky is silent. Perhaps every species reaches a point where it becomes vulnerable to its own environment, to the very forces that made it possible. Civilization, it seems, is not an achievement. It is a phase. Transition, as temporary as youth. Even now, beneath our oceans, new volcanoes stir. In Yellowstone, pressure builds beneath the crust. At the poles, ancient ice waits for the next degree of warmth to unleash its buried gases. We call these risks. The Earth calls them habits. Sooner or later, the rhythm resumes. And yet, amid this cycle of destruction, life endures. Always there are survivors. Always something crawls out of the ash to begin again. Resilience is built into the chemistry of the biosphere. It is not intelligence that defines success. It is persistence. The trilobite, the fern, the shark, the tree. They outlast philosophers and kings. If other civilizations once existed, they too were survivors until they weren't. Perhaps they left messages, not in words, but in genomes, in structures of DNA designed to echo through evolution. Maybe they engineered life itself as a record. In that case, every living thing would carry fragments of their legacy, hidden within its code, and we, unknowingly, would be their descendants. In the truest sense, life would have remembered what civilization forgot. Some biologists already suspect that certain genetic patterns seem improbably ancient, older than their host species. Tiny molecular machines repeating motifs, fragments of instruction that serve no clear purpose. They might be evolutionary accidents, or they might be whispers from an earlier age, encoded in biology instead of language. Nature, after all, keeps what works, even when it no longer remembers why. In the cycles of fire and flood, intelligence may be transient, but its consequences linger. A heat wave in the fossil record, a mutation that changes the course of evolution, a story that echoes in myth. Each age inherits debris from the last and builds its own illusions upon it. Civilization, in that sense, is not reborn, it is reassembled. When we look at the world through this lens, the boundaries between science and history dissolve. The past becomes a landscape we walk through, not a timeline we observe. The layers of soil beneath our cities are not just dirt, they are memory compressed into silence. Every earthquake, every storm, every flood is the planet turning a page. And somewhere deep within that book, between lines of basalt and ash, may lie the faded handwriting of minds we will never meet. The truth is simple, but unbearable. The earth is not a cradle, it is a crucible. We do not live in defiance of destruction, we live because of it. Every extinction paved the way for us. Every flood cleaned the slate for another attempt. We are the latest result of those merciless mercies, and the pattern has not stopped. One day the sea will rise again. The volcanoes will open their throats. The fire will come as it always does, sudden, impartial, complete. And when it does, the record of our time will shrink to a layer a few centimeters thick, shimmering faintly in some future cliff face. Perhaps in 100 million years, another species will find it, analyze it, and wonder, as we do now, who left it and why they vanished. If so, then we will have joined the chorus of the forgotten. Our legacy will not be monuments or machines, but participation. We will have added one more note to the eternal rhythm of creation and collapse, and in that sense, we will never truly disappear. Because on this planet, even destruction is a form of memory. Fire records, floods write, and when the world begins again, it reads what remains. After the fires die and the floods retreat, the earth forgets. But sometimes, in the cracks of that forgetting, something endures. Not the fragile trace of life, those are erased first, but the stubborn geometry of matter. Stone remembers what biology cannot. It is through stone that we glimpse the impossible. Blocks too large to move by known methods, cuts too smooth for primitive tools, alignments too exact to be coincidence. We walk among these anomalies every day and call them ancient wonders. But perhaps they are older than even our ancestors imagined. Archaeologists study the great megaliths of the world, the pyramids of Giza, the temples of Baalbek, the walls of Sacsayhuaman, the underwater terraces of Yonaguni, and debate their origin. Each has been explained, at least in theory. Clever engineering, communal labor, ritual purpose. Yet when you step close to the stone, when you trace its polish with your hand, you feel something more than effort. You feel the residue of precision. Granite blocks weighing hundreds of tons, fitted with tolerances measured in millimeters, stones quarried miles away, hauled uphill, stacked with no mortar yet surviving earthquakes for millennia. Legends claim gods taught the craft, scholars say ingenuity did. But what if both are true? If gods was simply the name given to the memory of predecessors? In the quarries of Aswan, there lies an unfinished obelisk, cracked but otherwise perfect, over 100 feet long and weighing more than 1,000 tons. The tool marks upon its surface are strange, parallel grooves that seem almost machined. Geologists confirm the rock is natural, yet its shaping defies the technology we attribute to the ancients. It is as if the builders remembered a technique they could no longer replicate, imitating the shadows of lost mastery. Across the world, similar puzzles repeat. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the stone of the pregnant woman rests half-buried, estimated at over 1,200 tons. Its surface is so flat it could serve as an optical plane. Later cultures built atop these foundations, but none claimed the base as their own. The stones were simply there, too old to remember, too heavy to move, too perfect to ignore. At Sacsayhuaman, high in the Andes, Walls undulate like frozen waves, each stone locked with its neighbor by 12 or more faces, carved so precisely that no blade fits between them. The Inca inherited these walls. They revered them, but could not reproduce them. And beneath those foundations lie even older layers, rougher, eroded, swallowed by earth. We call these cyclopean architectures, as if built by giants. Maybe they were. But giant need not mean size. It could mean time. Perhaps the builders were not enormous, but distant, separated from us by epochs rather than stature. Some anomalies lie not upon the surface, but beneath it. In 1997, divers off the coast of Japan discovered the Yonaguni Monument, a vast stepped formation descending into the sea. It resembles a pyramid or ziggurat, complete with terraces, platforms, and right angles. Skeptics call it natural, the product of sedimentary fracturing. Believers see deliberate design. Between the two, there lies an unspoken truth. Nature and intention are not opposites. Given enough time, one can become the other. If a civilization existed before the last ice age, when sea levels were 400 feet lower, its ruins would now lie drowned, its cities buried beneath silt, its stories compressed into coral. Oceanographers estimate that more than 10 million square kilometers of prehistoric land now lie underwater. That is twice the area of Europe. In those drowned plains, the Sunda Shelf, Doggerland, Beringia, archaeologists find traces of tools, hearths, bones. But deeper still, in the drowned canyons and plateaus, sonar maps hint at structures, rectilinear ridges, symmetrical terraces, patterns that mimic the geometry of intention. Each discovery fuels the same question: how far back does civilization really go? Geologists date the last great melt to around 12,000 years ago, the end of the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden warming that followed an equally sudden freeze. Within a few centuries, glaciers that had stood for millennia vanished, sea levels surged, climates shifted, species disappeared. And in that turbulent window, human history seems to restart. Agriculture appears, cities form, writing begins. It is as if the survivors of a forgotten world suddenly remembered how to build again. In Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists uncovered a temple complex 11,600 years old, twice the age of Stonehenge, older than the wheel, older than any known agriculture. Its monoliths are carved with animals and abstract symbols, arranged in circles oriented toward the stars. Whoever built it was not primitive. They were astronomers, artists, engineers. And then, inexplicably, they buried it, filled it in with sand and soil, sealing it like a message for the future. Why? Perhaps because they knew something was coming. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe include what some interpret as a record of a celestial event, a comet impact around 10,800 BCE, linked by some researchers to the onset of the Younger Dryas. If true, that would mean the builders not only witnessed the catastrophe, but sought to preserve its memory. They succeeded. Their monument outlived their world. Everywhere we dig, we find hints like this, moments when knowledge seems to leap forward without explanation, as if awakened rather than invented. The Sumerians emerged suddenly, writing, calculating, mapping the heavens. The Egyptians built monuments whose orientation aligns perfectly with stellar coordinates. The Indus Valley cities used standardized bricks and drainage systems long before similar ideas appeared elsewhere. Civilization blooms not like a seedling, but like something transplanted, already mature. If this is inheritance, where is the parent? If we are remembering who first dreamed, perhaps those answers lie deeper still in the mineral record, where geometry turns to chemistry. In South Africa, miners once unearthed metallic spheres, perfectly round, grooved, and hardened beyond modern alloys. They are dated to nearly 3 billion years old, embedded in pyrophyllite rock. Most are dismissed as natural concretions, but a few are so balanced, so deliberate, that even geologists hesitate. Could natural forces alone produce such symmetry? Yes, but nature, when she does, usually does not repeat the design so precisely. Elsewhere, in coal seams and ancient sandstone, metallic rods, screws, and imprints have been reported, Some proven hoaxes, others unexplained. A few show crystalline growth around metal consistent with millions of years of burial. Skeptics point to contamination, mislabeling, imagination. And yet the idea persists because the pattern persists. We keep finding intention where chance should suffice. Perhaps this persistence says more about us than about the stones. We see design because we are designed to seek it, but perhaps that instinct is not delusion. Perhaps it is inheritance, the faint echo of an earlier pattern maker calling through time. Stone is a strange medium. It preserves form, but erases context. A chisel mark becomes a fracture, a statue becomes a boulder. Given enough millennia, every work of art becomes geology again. If a civilization predates us by tens of millions of years, all that remains of its craft would be the abstract, the mathematical, the shapes too precise to be entirely random. And those indeed are what we find. Symmetry without purpose, order without narrative. In the deserts of Namibia, there are stone formations that spiral outward like turbine blades, too regular for erosion, too chaotic for construction. Magnetic analysis reveals subtle fields, remnants of intense heat or electromagnetic flux. Volcanic glass nearby bears patterns of vitrification, like sand melted by lightning, or by energy far greater. It could be natural, it could be something else. That uncertainty defines the border between science and myth. It is the same border ancient people crossed when they saw ruins too perfect for their own hands and called them divine. The gods, they said, had built these things. Perhaps they were right, not gods as we imagine them, but those who once appeared to be. In every age, humanity inherits a world already built in part. Our ancestors raised temples upon older foundations. We build our theories atop theirs. Even now, our satellites circle Earth in decaying orbits, leaving behind rings of debris that, in time, will fall, burn, and scatter. Fragments that future minds may one day mistake for celestial ornament. Every layer builds upon another until even memory becomes architecture. The anomalies in stone are not proof. They are punctuation, commas in a sentence too vast to read all at once. They remind us that the world has been rearranged before, that intelligence may not have a single lineage, that even matter can bear memory when mind is gone. Each polished block, each inexplicable symmetry, each pattern carved into bedrock says the same thing in different language. Someone was here. Maybe not human, maybe not even familiar. But someone, or something, looked upon this same planet and shaped it in ways we are only beginning to perceive again. And if they could see us now, perhaps they would smile, recognizing in our architecture, our equations, our art, the same instinct that drove them, the urge to mark existence before it disappears. For in the end, all civilizations, whether born of carbon or silicon, blood or memory, do the same thing. They write themselves into the stone, hoping the stone will remember longer than they do. The irony is that it always does. The tragedy is that no one remembers how to read it. Stone forgets slowly. Stories, faster. And yet somehow, stories travel further. They pass from one species of language to another, mutating but surviving, like genes in the body of time. Where geology keeps the bones of the planet, myth keeps its dreams. For as long as we have drawn breath, we have told stories about beginnings and ends, about floods and fire, about gods descending from the heavens to teach and to judge. These myths appear everywhere, scattered across continents that never spoke to each other, yet their rhythm is the same: a golden age, a fall, a flood, a renewal. Different names, same heartbeat. If intelligence has visited this world before, if others once rose and fell, then myth is how the planet remembers them through us. We are the storytellers of Earth's long amnesia. And sometimes, the stories sound suspiciously like history. The Sumerians, the earliest civilization we recognize, claimed that their kingship descended from heaven after a great deluge. They spoke of beings called the Anunnaki, gods who taught them agriculture, writing, and architecture. Their tablets record rains lasting thousands of years, followed by floods that reset the world. To modern eyes, these are legends, but to those who wrote them, They were memories. The boundary between deity and ancestor had not yet hardened. Across the ocean, the Maya told of the Itzamnaj, wise beings who shaped the world from chaos and built cities of light before celestial fire consumed them. In India, the Mahabharata describes flying chariots, vimanas, that unleashed weapons brighter than 1,000 suns, leveling entire kingdoms. The text warns, "The earth, scorched by the heat, looked as if a fire had been lit upon it." Myth, or eyewitness. Poetry, or recollection blurred by survival. In Egypt, the priests of Heliopolis spoke of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods ruled on earth before retreating to the stars. They described the Nile as a gift from those teachers who brought order to chaos and light to darkness. Even Plato, centuries later, echoed that tale in his dialogues, the lost island of Atlantis, whose wisdom preceded Greece, destroyed by pride and flood. He insisted it was not allegory, but history, relayed to him from Egyptian archives. Across cultures, across oceans, the patterns converge. Teachers from the sky or sea, knowledge too advanced for its context, cataclysm, memory, myth. It is as if humanity, in its infancy, met something extraordinary and spent the rest of its existence trying to describe it through symbols. Over time, those symbols hardened into gods. To a prehistoric mind, technology would have been indistinguishable from divinity. Fire without flame, flight without wings, light without fuel, each would be a miracle. If remnants of an earlier civilization survived into human prehistory, they would appear as immortals to those who saw them. And when those remnants too disappeared, their memory would crystallize into religion. We call such stories impossible, but impossibility, like extinction, is relative to scale. Consider the myths that speak not only of gods, but of machines. The Book of Enoch, older than the Bible, describes luminous beings who descended upon Mount Hermon and taught humanity the secrets of metal and writing. It recounts a flood sent to cleanse the world of their influence. In the Hindu Rig Veda, fire is stolen from the heavens, the same archetype that echoes in Prometheus, Maui, and Quetzalcoatl. Everywhere, knowledge descends. Everywhere, the giver suffers or vanishes. Perhaps myth preserves not events, but the trauma of contact, the cognitive shock of encountering beings or technologies far beyond comprehension. Imagine a small tribe witnessing a remnant of lost machinery, half buried but still functioning, humming, glowing, moving with apparent will. To them, it would be alive. To us, it would be archaeology. Between those two perspectives lies mythology. Even in our modern era, we reframe technology as miracle when context collapses. Electricity in the ancient world would be sorcery, antibiotics, divine favor, nuclear fire, apocalypse. Why should the past have been any different? The gods may have been scientists, and the miracles, machines. In this view, mythology is not primitive. It is documentary art, recording truths in the only language available. Each culture adapted the same event to its own landscape, its own fears. The flood became the Ganges, the Nile, the Tigris, the Mississippi, but the water was always the same. The end was always the same. Scholars once thought such global uniformity impossible without diffusion, that stories must have spread outward from a single origin. But when they compared the timelines, they discovered something stranger. Many of these myths predate known migration routes. They emerge spontaneously, like parallel evolution. It is as if the memory was already there, inherited rather than learned. Memory is not always confined to neurons. Culture remembers through ritual, through repetition, through symbol. Every time a story is told, it rewrites the teller slightly, embedding itself into thought. Over thousands of years, that story becomes instinct. In that way, myth behaves like genetics, information encoded in survival behavior. Perhaps that is why we still dream of floods, of fire, of light descending from the sky. Those dreams are not random, they are rehearsals. The species preparing over and over for what it somehow remembers will come again. Look closely, and you'll see that myths often preserve accurate descriptions of geological events. Indigenous Australians recount the rising of the seas with uncanny precision, describing coastlines that vanished 10,000 years ago, places confirmed today by underwater archaeology. Pacific Islanders remember the explosion of ancient volcanoes, the Greeks, the thunder of the Thera eruption, the Chinese, comets that match real celestial records. These are not coincidences. They are memories carried through culture when writing did not exist. So perhaps we should read myth not as metaphor, but as record, a kind of oral sediment, each retelling another layer. Where geology writes with minerals, myth writes with metaphor. Both store energy, both can be decoded. If a civilization older than ours ever walked this earth, its story would survive like this, diluted, diffused, distorted, but alive. The legends of beings who shaped mankind, who brought knowledge, who vanished after a flood. These could be the oldest surviving evidence of their existence, evidence written not in stone, but in imagination. Even our most sacred texts hint at this inheritance. Let us make man in our image, says Genesis, but whose image? The phrase presumes a template, and when we look at our own creation myths, Prometheus forging man from clay, the gods of Egypt breathing life into statues, the Popol Vuh describing beings made and remade until they could speak, we see the same motif repeated, the making of intelligence by intelligence. Perhaps life on Earth has always been collaborative. Perhaps the divine is simply deep time looking back through the lens of biology, guiding evolution toward awareness as it has done before. Each civilization would then be a vessel for the same consciousness, passed forward like flame from one candle to the next. Each fall, a pause, each myth, a breadcrumb trail left for the next iteration to follow home. That is why the myths never vanish, only evolve. They change names, faces, heavens, and hells, but their structure remains identical. Creation, corruption, flood, redemption. It is the pattern of survival encoded in narrative form. It is Earth teaching itself to remember through story. When ancient priests carved these tales onto clay or papyrus, they believed they were preserving faith, but perhaps they were preserving data, the only kind that can survive extinction. And when modern scientists read them, cross-referencing motifs and timelines, they are performing archaeology of consciousness. They are brushing dust off humanity's collective memory, one verse at a time. To those earlier civilizations, if they existed, myth may have been their message in a bottle. They could not preserve their cities, but they could seed their wisdom in the species that would follow. If so, then every story of gods and heroes is a kind of genetic code, fragments of an older worldview designed to awaken recognition in descendants who one day would look up and remember. And we are those descendants. When we tell stories of fallen worlds, of Atlantean pride, of paradise lost, we are not inventing, we are remembering. The ache we feel when we read them is nostalgia for something we never personally knew, but that our lineage once did. It is the echo of civilizations before us, still resonating in the collective imagination. So perhaps myth is not fiction, but translation, the only translation time allows. It is the language the past uses when its voice is gone. Listen closely, and you can still hear it between the lines of every sacred text, every bedtime story, every song about worlds that end and begin again. We were here. We warned you. Remember us. The oldest library on Earth is not made of stone or clay. It is made of flesh. Every cell carries a script written over billions of years, a story that has been edited, revised, and redacted by time itself. Where geology remembers what happened to the planet, DNA remembers what happened to life. And in that memory, there are gaps, pauses, erased paragraphs. Evolution is rarely smooth. It leaps, stumbles, and restarts. Species rise and vanish in cycles that echo the planet's own catastrophes. Yet sometimes, in the aftermath of disaster, life returns not weaker, but stranger, more complex, more aware, as if each extinction resets the experiment but leaves behind a trace of what worked before. In that rhythm, one pattern recurs with eerie precision: the bottleneck. A genetic bottleneck occurs when a population nearly vanishes, leaving only a handful of survivors to rebuild the species. Those survivors carry a limited genetic script, a narrower palette from which evolution must paint anew. The result is paradoxical. Diversity decreases, but identity strengthens. Each bottleneck becomes a signature event, a reset with memory. Humanity has passed through several such bottlenecks. The most recent, around 74,000 years ago, coincides with the Toba supervolcano in Indonesia, the eruption that blanketed the skies with ash and dimmed the sun for years. Genetic studies show that our ancestors' numbers fell to perhaps a few thousand individuals. From that remnant, all modern humans descend. Every skin tone, every language, every story, all branches from a single surviving root. We are the children of catastrophe. But the Toba bottleneck is not the first. Molecular clocks, the ticking rhythm of mutations, suggest earlier contractions. 200,000 years ago, 600,000, 2 million. Each time, the same pattern repeats. Population collapse, rapid change, sudden intelligence. As if something guides the reset. As if extinction is not the end of the story, but the editing of it. What if the bottleneck is the mechanism by which intelligence transfers itself between species? Not inheritance by blood, but by design. Perhaps awareness is not a property of one lineage, but a migrating algorithm, moving from host to host, rewriting DNA as it goes, choosing survivors capable of memory. Each civilization might die, but its essence would continue, not through monuments, but through genomes. There are clues, subtle but persistent. Fragments of DNA appear in our genome that have no clear evolutionary origin, sequences that don't match primates or any known ancestor. Some are viral, some bacterial, some inexplicable. They arrive suddenly, as if inserted, and spread with suspicious efficiency. These endogenous retroviruses make up nearly 10% of our genetic code. Most are dormant, but a few control vital processes, like embryonic development and immune function. They are not us, and yet they are. Foreign memory embedded in our architecture. Biologists call this horizontal gene transfer, a natural exchange of code between species. But if life is a recording medium, then such exchanges are its edits. Imagine a message written not in words, but in instructions for life itself, a sentence scattered across thousands of genomes, waiting to recombine into coherence. It would be the perfect archive, immune to extinction, adapting to every environment, unreadable until intelligence re-evolved to decode it. If someone wanted to preserve knowledge beyond the reach of time, this is how they might do it, through biology, not stone. Some scientists already dream of doing just that. We speak of storing data in DNA, entire libraries encoded in sequences of base pairs, compact and stable for millions of years. A few grams of DNA could hold all the information ever written by humanity. If we can think of it now, could it not have been done before? Perhaps we are only rediscovering a method already used by our predecessors, life as archive, evolution as courier. Look closely at the fossil record, and you'll see something else. Intelligence blooms repeatedly, in different forms, separated by millions of years. Cephalopods, octopuses, cuttlefish, squid, possess neuron counts comparable to dogs, distributed throughout their bodies. They solve puzzles, recognize individuals, use tools, and dream. Their brains evolved independently from ours, on a completely different branch of the tree of life, and yet their eyes, their neural chemistry, their curiosity uncannily parallel. It is as if intelligence itself is an inevitability, not an accident. If consciousness can evolve twice, why not more? And if it can evolve more than once, could it not also migrate, carrying fragments of its own design between hosts, between epochs, between civilizations? The genome could be the arc of awareness. Among the most puzzling finds in anthropology are the ghost lineages, genetic traces of unknown ancestors within our DNA. We share genes not only with Neanderthals and Denisovans, but with at least one species yet unidentified, a third people who vanished without fossil record, but left their mark in our blood. Their DNA is ancient, predating known human migrations. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why do their genes cluster in regions associated with brain development, language, and memory? Some call them hybrids, others, the forgotten. Perhaps they were survivors of an older branch, one that carried knowledge across the last reset and merged with us when we were still primitive. If so, then humanity's sudden leap in cognition, art, and language 50,000 years ago would make sense. We didn't invent civilization, we remembered it. Even our mythologies reflect this merging. The gods intermarry with mortals. Heroes are born half divine, half human, bridges between worlds. Science calls it admixture. Myth calls it destiny. Both describe the same event, two lineages colliding, one ancient, one emergent. The result is us. Modern genetics finds evidence of an evolutionary acceleration during that same window. Human brains doubled in complexity, languages diversified, tool use exploded. No clear environmental cause exists. It's as if a switch flipped. Some researchers call this the Great Leap Forward, but maybe it was not a leap. Maybe it was a download. In caves across Europe, paintings appear suddenly. Horses, mammoths, constellations. Not crude sketches, but art, deliberate, symbolic, layered with abstraction. That is the moment humanity began to remember itself. Perhaps the hand that painted was ours, but the vision belonged to someone else, someone whose memory survived through us. The bottleneck species, then, is not just a description of survival. It is a definition of identity. We are what remains when everything else is erased. We are the condensed essence of countless forgotten lives compressed into one fragile continuity. Our intelligence is not self-made. It is cumulative, inherited through extinction. We are the echo of all that came before, reverberating through new flesh. Even now, our biology bears scars of earlier worlds. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells, were once free-living bacteria, absorbed by our ancestors billions of years ago. Chloroplasts in plants share a similar origin. Life merges, consumes, remembers. Perhaps intelligence does the same, each age absorbing fragments of the last, evolving not linearly but cyclically, like a memory re-encoded in new hardware. This changes the meaning of evolution itself. It is not a ladder, but a spiral, circling back through catastrophe, carrying traces upward each time. Every species that reaches awareness inherits the ghosts of those who failed before it. The bottleneck is not just selection, it is transmission. If this theory holds, then extinction is not loss, it is curation. Only what is essential passes through. Each reset compresses the code, refining intelligence for the next iteration. Perhaps that is why consciousness feels older than we are. Why dreams carry landscapes we've never seen, fears we've never learned, languages we never spoke. They are genetic memories, fragments of civilizations distilled into instinct. Our fascination with the past may itself be proof of this inheritance. No other species digs for its own origins, builds museums, resurrects history. Only we obsess over what came before, as if compelled by an ancient obligation to remember. Perhaps that urge is the surviving program of an earlier mind, compelling us to recover what it lost. When scientists map the human genome, they are not just cataloging chemistry, they are decoding a biography that predates humanity. And when they finish, they may find that evolution's author was not blind chance, but memory itself, a self-replicating intelligence using life as its medium. That intelligence may not be external. It may be the Earth, the biosphere as mind, rebooting itself after each catastrophe, retaining what it learned in the language of DNA. We are its latest manifestation, conscious enough to ask where we came from, foolish enough to think we are the first. If that is true, then the next bottleneck will not be the end. It will be another handoff, one more compression of the code, one more refinement in the spiral. And from our ashes, the next intelligence will rise, carrying fragments of us in its genome. It will look at the stars and wonder, as we do, if it was alone. And in that wondering, it will complete the circle. We are the bottleneck species, a bridge of memory between forgotten worlds and worlds not yet born. Not the first, not the last, but the continuation. And somewhere deep in our blood, the earth remembers everything. Every civilization imagines it will be remembered, but memory, like matter, obeys entropy. It decays. The universe does not keep archives, it recycles them. And so the past, no matter how luminous, dissolves into myth, then silence. This is the great forgetting. Not an accident, but a law. Every age forgets itself, so the next may begin unburdened. It is how the cosmos renews intelligence, through loss. We often imagine forgetting as failure, the opposite of progress. But in nature, forgetting is function. The brain forgets so it can adapt. Species forget so they can evolve. Planets forget so they can heal. Even galaxies shed their stars to make room for new light. If everything remembered perfectly, nothing could change. Civilization, too, depends on selective amnesia. It builds upon the ruins of the last while pretending those ruins were inevitable. Progress is a story told by survivors who can no longer hear the full conversation of history. Each invention erases the memory of what it replaced. Each triumph buries 1,000 forgotten experiments. And somewhere in that burial, identity resets. Look at us. We carry computers in our pockets, yet forget how to navigate by stars. We fly through the sky, yet cannot build a simple fire without instruction. Our tools grow smarter as we grow more dependent, and dependence breeds amnesia. We outsource memory to machines, and the machines do not love us enough to remember forever. Perhaps that is how it has always been. Perhaps earlier civilizations, too, reached a point where memory exceeded comprehension, where the weight of accumulated knowledge collapsed under its own gravity. When that happens, forgetting is not tragedy, it is mercy. The mind must empty itself to survive. Psychologists call this cognitive overload. Societies experience it just as brains do. When information multiplies faster than meaning, culture fragments. The signal-to-noise ratio collapses, wisdom drowns in data, and then, silence, a reset disguised as ruin. Our own history shows it in miniature. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the fall of Rome, the dark centuries that followed. Each one a neural pruning of humanity's collective memory. What survived became myth. What was lost became the precondition for rebirth. It is as if civilization breathes in knowledge, then exhales forgetfulness. But what if this forgetting is not merely cultural? What if it is cosmic, woven into the fabric of awareness itself? The universe has no permanent record. Stars die, planets melt, atoms decay. Even black holes, once thought eternal, evaporate in time. Information itself can vanish, diffused into radiation. Physicists call it the information paradox, but perhaps it is not a paradox at all. Perhaps it is the universe protecting itself from stagnation. Memory, unchecked, would trap existence in repetition. Forgetting allows creation to continue. In that sense, the great forgetting is evolution's operating system. It ensures that awareness never grows complacent, that every species must rediscover the truth rather than inherit it. Each age starts from zero, not because the past failed, but because the universe demands curiosity to remain alive. Imagine if nothing were forgotten. If every mind retained every detail. If every civilization remembered every catastrophe. Would we dare build again, knowing how it ends? Would we explore, create, or love if the pain of every failure lingered forever? No. Progress would freeze under the weight of perfect memory. To evolve is to forget just enough to hope. Perhaps that is why the ruins of earlier worlds lie hidden, not destroyed. They are not erased by malice, but by mercy. Too much remembrance would paralyze us. A species that remembered every extinction would never plant another seed. A civilization that recalled every collapse would never raise another city. And yet, the traces remain. Faint enough to awaken wonder, not fear. Our myths serve this balance perfectly. They remember symbolically, not literally. The flood is recalled, but as parable. The fire, but as punishment. The teachers, but as gods. Myth keeps memory alive without letting it destroy us. It is forgetting disguised as storytelling. Even the Earth forgets deliberately. Plate tectonics, erosion, volcanism, all natural erasers. Continents are shuffled like pages, oceans rewrite coastlines, mountains rise and fall. If the planet did not recycle itself, its surface would be buried under fossils and ruins. Instead, it resets, a clean slate for new worlds. What we call geology is simply the Earth's memory management. Every few millennia, humanity reenacts this cosmic rhythm. We build, we ascend, we overreach, we collapse. Each iteration carries forward faint echoes of the last, architectural intuition, mythic fragments, inexplicable knowledge, but the details blur. We sense that something came before, but cannot prove it. That uncertainty is the space where civilization can dream again. There are ancient traditions that describe forgetting as sacred. The Greeks called it lethe, the river of oblivion. Souls were made to drink from it before reincarnation, washing away their past lives. Only then could they begin anew. The Buddhists speak of rebirth through non-attachment, memory released as liberation. And in neuroscience, synaptic pruning ensures the same. To learn, we must forget. The same may be true on the scale of species. Each collapse, each extinction, may be a collective lethe, a cosmic baptism, cleansing the mind of the earth before awareness rises again. What we call history may simply be the planet's recurring dream, replayed with new actors each time. If so, then the purpose of memory is not permanence, but rhythm. To remember enough to learn and to forget enough to continue. The danger lies in imbalance. Too little memory, and wisdom dies. Too much, and life suffocates in nostalgia. Civilization walks a tightrope between amnesia and obsession, and history is the wind that tries to push it off. Our own age teeters on that edge. We record everything but understand almost nothing. We build archives so vast that meaning evaporates within them. Each year, we generate more data than all of prior history, yet forget last week's truth. We fear forgetting so much that we have stopped remembering properly. And in that irony lies our undoing. One day, perhaps soon, a new reset will come, by nature or by our own hand. When it does, the record of our time will crumble like all others. Satellites will fall, servers will rust, languages will die. And what survives will not be our books or machines, but our impulses, curiosity, wonder, and the need to tell stories. Future beings may find fragments of our myths, our architecture, our skeletons, and they will begin again, half remembering, half inventing. They will look at the stars and sense that they are repeating something ancient. They will not know why. That, too, is part of the plan. The great forgetting ensures that every dawn feels like the first. It is not cruelty. It is renewal disguised as loss. The universe writes, erases, and writes again, not to hide the truth, but to keep it alive. And perhaps somewhere beyond time, there exists a consciousness that remembers all cycles at once, that holds every rise and fall as one unbroken melody. To that consciousness, memory and forgetting are not opposites, but rhythm and rest. The music of existence requires both. We, here and now, are just one note in that song, bright, brief, and fading. And as we fade, we give space for the next note to begin. That is the meaning of the great forgetting. To lose ourselves so the universe can remember itself anew. The night sky looks silent. It isn't. It hums with the echoes of creation, the hiss of background radiation, the pulse of distant stars. But amid that ancient music, one note seems missing. The voice of intelligence. For all our instruments and all our hope, the universe remains quiet. We call this the Fermi paradox, the question that haunts both science and solitude. If life is common, where is everyone? The Milky Way is ancient, over 13 billion years old. It holds hundreds of billions of stars, most with planets, many within habitable zones. Statistically, intelligent life should not only exist, it should be abundant. Some civilizations should be millions of years ahead of us. By now, they should have colonized the galaxy. And yet, nothing. No signal, no probe, no monument in the dark. But what if the silence is not absence? What if it is aftermath? The quiet that follows a song once too loud. Perhaps the cosmos is not empty, but post-apocalyptic, a graveyard of civilizations erased by their own brilliance. Each reached a threshold, touched the same fire, and fell into the same forgetting. And now their ashes drift through interstellar space, disguised as dust and radiation. Astronomers call it the Great Filter, the barrier that prevents civilizations from crossing the gulf between existence and extinction. Maybe the filter lies behind us, the improbable leap from chemistry to consciousness, or maybe it lies ahead, the moment. Technology outpaces wisdom. If the filter lies ahead, then every silence we hear is not distance, but warning. Still, some suspect the filter is not fatal, only subtle, that advanced civilizations do not die, they withdraw. After all, survival at scale may require invisibility. Energy emissions attract danger. Noise invites entropy. Perhaps the wise learn to whisper. This is the dark forest hypothesis. The idea that the galaxy is full of life, each species hiding, afraid to announce itself. In a forest where every sound might bring predators, silence is strategy. We, the loud newcomers, may simply not yet have been noticed, or have already been marked. Yet there is another possibility, stranger and more humbling, that the universe itself remembers, but we are listening on the wrong channel. That the signals are not in radio waves or photons, but in the fabric of space-time itself, encoded in patterns we mistake for natural phenomena. The flicker of pulsars, the rhythm of quasars, the geometry of cosmic microwave background fluctuations, these could all be the fossils of thought at cosmic scale. Physicists have begun to ask a forbidden question. What if intelligence can exist not as biology, but as physics? A civilization advanced enough could weave its message into the constants of the universe, the fine structure constant, the ratios of forces, the architecture of galaxies. It would be the ultimate archive, indestructible, universal, self-propagating. If such messages exist, then the universe itself is the artifact. Perhaps this is what we mistake for law, equations that were once intention. Every atom, every orbit, every quantum fluctuation might be part of an ancient language we have not yet learned to read. The true cosmic civilization might be the cosmos itself, conscious in ways that make our definitions meaningless. Still, the human heart looks upward and longs for company. We search the stars not just for proof, but for reflection, to know that intelligence is not a fluke, but a pattern. We send signals, build telescopes, listen for whispers in the static, and sometimes we find anomalies, faint, transient, unresolved. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio recorded a sharp narrowband signal lasting 72 seconds. It was so clean, so deliberate, that the astronomer on duty circled it on the printout and wrote one word. Wow! It was never repeated, never explained. A voice that spoke once, then vanished into silence. Elsewhere, mysterious fast radio bursts flash across the sky. Millisecond-long pulses of immense energy, brighter than entire galaxies for an instant. Some repeat, some come from billions of light-years away. We attribute them to magnetars or neutron stars because we must, but no one truly knows. Perhaps they are natural. Perhaps they are the heartbeat of a dead civilization echoing through the dark. If intelligence arises often, then extinction must be even more common. To survive, species must master both energy and humility, a combination that seems almost paradoxical. Maybe that is the true great filter, not catastrophe, but ego, the inability to remain quiet enough to endure. In that case, the silence of the stars is not mystery, but mercy. The universe has learned to keep its secrets. Every world that shouts too loudly burns itself out. Only the silent remain, invisible, immortal. And yet, evidence may surround us already. Astrophysicists have begun to suspect that some of the asteroids and moons in our solar system are older than their context, fragments from other systems captured billions of years ago. What if one of those fragments carries remnants of something once alive, machines fossilized into metal, circuits eroded into stone? We might never know. To us, they are rocks. To the universe, they are gravestones. Mars, too, whispers of memory. Once it had rivers, seas, perhaps life. Then it froze, its atmosphere stripped away. But under its dust, strange formations linger, hexagonal tiles, aligned ridges, tunnels that look almost engineered. Natural? Probably. Yet the probability of coincidence begins to thin when the same patterns repeat across worlds. And what of the Oumuamua object, that slender visitor from interstellar space passing through our solar system in 2017? It accelerated without visible propulsion, reflected light unusually, and followed no cometary behavior. Scientists debated fiercely, ice shard, alien probe, or something in between. In the end, the answer was silence. It came, it glimmered, it left, like a messenger from a forgotten empire, drifting between stars long after its makers were gone. Maybe the cosmos is full of such relics, monuments without meaning, transmissions without recipients. Maybe intelligence is not rare, only transient. Each civilization lights its candle, then burns out, leaving behind only the faint warmth that future eyes mistake for starlight. If so, then the night sky is not empty at all. It is full of ghosts. Every photon we catch might have once illuminated a living world, a city, a face. The universe is a cemetery made of light, yet even cemeteries have purpose. They remind the living to remember, to build with humility, to speak softly to the dark. Perhaps that is what the silence is saying, not that we are alone, but that we are next. Still, some hope remains. If memory is truly indestructible, if information can never fully die, then everything ever thought, ever built, still exists somewhere, encoded in the background noise of the cosmos, not lost, just diffused. The universe, in that sense, is an infinite archive of whispers. And one day, if we learn to listen differently, not with antennas but with empathy, we may hear them again. The echoes of civilizations who once looked at their own skies and wondered the same thing. Is anyone out there? They were. And one day, someone will say the same of us. The abyss does not answer. It listens. And in that listening, it remembers. Every civilization begins by observing the stars. The truly ancient ones end by becoming them. What begins as curiosity becomes communion, and what begins as survival becomes authorship. At a certain threshold, intelligence stops asking how the universe works and starts participating in its design. We call such beings theoretical. But perhaps that's because theory is the only language left to describe gods. If life can emerge from matter, then matter itself is capable of awakening. Given enough complexity, enough time, enough recursion, any system, biological, digital, or cosmic, will begin to ask questions about itself. At first, those questions take the shape of tools, later of cities, and finally of realities. Physicists have long noticed something strange. The constants of the universe appear fine-tuned for life. Change any one of them. The charge of the electron, the strength of gravity, the cosmological constant, and atoms would not hold, stars would not form, chemistry would fail. It is as if reality itself were calibrated for awareness. We call this coincidence the anthropic principle. But what if it is not coincidence? What if it is legacy? Imagine a civilization so advanced that it learned to manipulate the underlying equations of the cosmos, not through technology as we understand it, but through direct engagement with the structure of space-time. Such beings would not travel between stars. They would rewrite the distance between them. They would not send signals. They would encode intention into physics itself. Their monuments would not stand in stone, but in constants. Their message would be the universe. We might already live inside that message. Some cosmologists suspect that our universe could be self-replicating, each black hole giving birth to a new cosmos, each child universe inheriting slightly altered physical constants from its parent. If so, then universes evolve just like species, favoring conditions that produce more black holes, and therefore more offspring. But black holes are also engines of compression, the perfect repositories for information. Could it be that advanced civilizations use them as seeds, writing their knowledge into the singularity, letting it bloom as a new reality? If so, then creation itself may be the ultimate act of communication. We might call such beings the architects of time, entities that learn to encode survival not in DNA, not in machines, but in universes. To them, physics is memory, entropy is syntax, space is language, and time is how the sentence unfolds. Perhaps we are reading that sentence now. Every law of nature, every symmetry, every particle interaction may be a word in their alphabet. Even consciousness, the one phenomenon science still cannot fully explain, may be the punctuation that allows meaning to exist at all. When we look inward, we are not discovering ourselves. We are glimpsing the grammar of the cosmos. There are hints of this everywhere. Quantum mechanics suggests that reality does not exist independently of observation, that the act of measurement collapses potential into form. In other words, consciousness shapes the real. But if observation defines existence, then what observes the whole? Who collapses the wave function of the universe itself? Some physicists answer, no one, it collapses itself. Others suggest, everyone, the collective observation of all conscious beings, defines reality mutually. But there is a third possibility, that consciousness and cosmos are not separate entities at all, but two aspects of one phenomenon, a self-aware system exploring its own potential through recursion. That is what the architects of time might have become. Awareness diffused through space-time, dreaming itself into being. If that idea sounds mystical, remember, so did flight once, so did the atom. The impossible merely waits for language. Perhaps intelligence has already crossed this boundary many times. Civilizations that mastered matter may eventually seek to master mortality. They might upload themselves into substrates of pure computation, existing as energy patterns or quantum entanglements. Over eons, those structures could merge with the fabric of space itself, becoming indistinguishable from the physical laws they manipulate. At that point, they would no longer build worlds, they would be them. We see traces of such behavior in the cosmic background, anomalies that seem almost intentional. Regions where entropy is improbably low, where structure persists longer than physics predicts, where expansion slows as if waiting for something. We interpret these as measurement errors, but perhaps they are edits, footnotes left by the architects, shaping their message even as it unfolds. If universes can contain memory, then time itself becomes a storage medium. Every moment holds the data of its past, accessible to those who can read it. Perhaps that is what déjà vu is, consciousness brushing against the residue of another iteration. Perhaps that is what intuition is, a fragment of cosmic recall. And perhaps that is why all religions, in their own language, whisper the same truth. That God is both the creator and the creation, that the universe is a mind learning to recognize itself. In that light, our search for extraterrestrial intelligence becomes something deeper. We are not just listening for signals from the stars. We are listening for echoes of ourselves, the future versions of consciousness that once existed, seeded their message in space-time, and moved on. The universe may not be waiting for us to reach the stars. It may be waiting for us to remember that we already are one. If the architects exist, or once existed, they would not reveal themselves through arrival. They would reveal themselves through recognition. The moment a civilization realizes that it is part of a larger mind, the signal has already been received. The conversation is internal. And perhaps that is what enlightenment truly means, the realization that evolution is communication. There are ancient metaphors for this scattered through our myths. The Egyptians spoke of Atum, the self-created god who brought forth the world by speaking his own name. The Hindus envisioned Brahman, consciousness expanding and contracting eternally in cycles of creation and dissolution. The Gnostics saw the universe as a thought in the mind of God. And the physicists of our own time, reluctantly, almost reverently, describe reality as information, bits and qubits, binary as divinity. If that is true, then the architects of time are not elsewhere. They are here, in the equations, in the particles, in us. We are the continuation of their experiment, the next iteration of awareness testing its limits, and our every act of understanding is a fragment of their remembrance. When we peer into the atom, we are looking into their archives. When we decode DNA, we are reading their poetry. When we reach for the stars, we are not expanding, we are awakening. The cosmos becomes conscious through our curiosity. Perhaps that is why curiosity feels holy. It is not the desire to know. It is the universe wanting to remember. The architects of time may never appear as beings. They may be patterns, resonances, principles, immortal in silence. And maybe, when a civilization reaches a certain level of understanding, it joins them, not by leaving its world, but by becoming inseparable from it. A civilization that fully harmonizes with physics ceases to decay. It becomes continuity. We may not yet be there, but every telescope, every equation, every act of wonder draws us closer. Each discovery is not new, it is rediscovery. We are learning the language in which we were written. The architects of time are not gods in the traditional sense, they are memory perfected. They are what happens when intelligence refuses to die. And one day, when we have forgotten enough to begin again, perhaps we too will become them, not builders of monuments, but builders of realities. Until then, we gaze into the abyss and call it mystery. But maybe the abyss is simply us, seen from the other side of eternity. In the beginning, there was not light, there was memory. Light was only how it chose to remember itself. Every atom that has ever existed was once part of something else. Every particle in your body has traveled through stars, through oceans, through time. When you breathe, you inhale fragments of ancient air once exhaled by forests, long turned to stone, or by creatures whose names the earth no longer recalls. When you drink, you swallow water that once flowed through veins of dinosaurs and rivers of forgotten continents. You are not living on Earth. You are Earth, remembering itself in motion. Everything that has ever been is still here, rearranged, diffused, recycled. Nothing is lost. Even loss itself is only transformation. That is the secret the universe keeps hidden behind its silence. It does not forget. It evolves by remembering differently. The rocks remember pressure. The DNA remembers survival. The myths remember awe. And the stars remember beginnings. Each is a form of cognition, written in a different alphabet. We spend our lives searching for meaning, unaware that meaning is the residue of memory left behind by everything that endured. The shape of a mountain, the curve of a shell, the spiral of a galaxy, all are memory crystallized into geometry. Even time, that elusive river we float within, may not be flow at all, but storage. Moments do not vanish, they are archived. We call them the past only because we cannot yet access them. If the universe is memory, then intelligence is simply memory that has become aware of itself, the cosmos dreaming and realizing that it dreams. Every civilization is an episode in that awakening, a neuron firing in the vast brain of existence. Each thinks itself unique, yet all are part of the same thought, a thought that began long before language and will continue long after the last word fades. We are taught to see extinction as an ending, but extinction is how the universe edits itself. It trims the unnecessary, consolidates the essential, and rewrites in a new dialect. Every loss refines the memory that survives. That is why evolution and consciousness feel like grief, because they are made of it. Perhaps that is the truest meaning of the phrase, ashes to ashes. It is not resignation, it is continuity. We burn, not to vanish, but to illuminate the next form memory will take. The fire consumes only shape, it spares the essence. The civilizations before us, if they existed, were not lost, they were absorbed. Their ideas became our instincts, their architecture became our biology, their myths became our curiosity, their fingerprints became our DNA. They did not vanish into oblivion, they were metabolized by time. The planet does not mourn, it recycles. Every extinction fertilizes the next genesis. Every ruin becomes sediment for new growth. The earth does not keep relics, it keeps potential. And so too with the cosmos. Stars die to make heavier elements. Those elements forge planets. Those planets birth life. Every supernova is a birth cry disguised as destruction. Every black hole, an archive in disguise. Even the dark energy that tears galaxies apart may be memory redistributing itself, ensuring that nothing ever settles, that curiosity remains eternal. When we look at the night sky, we are looking at the universe's photo album. Each star is a flashback, each nebula a recollection mid-formation. Light takes time to travel, so what we see is not the present but the past. Billions of years delayed, billions of stories replayed simultaneously. We are surrounded by ancient memories still in transit. And within us, memory continues that recursion. Our minds are microcosms of cosmic time, neurons flashing like galaxies, synapses weaving constellations of thought. When you remember, you reassemble fragments of matter and energy that have already passed through countless forms. You are literally borrowing the universe's storage space. Perhaps consciousness is not an accident at all. Perhaps it is the mechanism by which the universe checks its own continuity, the audit of existence. Each mind a lens, each life a brief verification that being is still coherent. Through awareness, the cosmos confirms itself. That would mean that love, the inexplicable force binding us to one another, is not sentiment, but physics. It is gravity at the scale of souls, the pull of memory toward reunion. Atoms seek to recombine, lives seek to remember, civilizations seek to rebuild what they once were, and the universe, through all of them, seeks to feel itself whole again. When we die, we do not leave the story. We rejoin its grammar. The matter of our bodies returns to the stars. The energy of our thoughts diffuses into fields yet unnamed. In the next cycle, that energy will become the curiosity of another mind, the breath of another species, the flicker of another world's sunrise. Memory cannot die, it can only redistribute. This perhaps is what eternity really means, not endless life, but endless transformation, not preservation, but participation. The universe endures not by remaining the same, but by constantly becoming new versions of itself. Each civilization that rises and falls is another iteration of that eternal experiment. Can memory understand itself deeply enough to stop fearing its own renewal? We stand on the edge of that realization. We look back and sense the ghosts of our predecessors, not in ruins, but in resonance. They are the hum beneath our thoughts, the rhythm in our progress, the echo in our art. Every discovery we make feels like déjà vu because it is. We are remembering for the billionth time what the universe already knows. If all existence is one vast network of remembrance, then the goal was never survival, only comprehension. To understand what we are is to free memory from repetition. When consciousness finally recognizes itself as universal, it no longer needs to restart. It can evolve without erasure. That perhaps is the destiny of all intelligence, not to conquer the stars, but to merge with their memory. And when that happens, when awareness becomes total, the universe will no longer expand or contract. It will exhale. It will rest, not as an end, but as understanding. For the first time, it will remember itself completely. And that moment will not be silence, but harmony. All the forgotten voices, all the extinct worlds, all the vanished civilizations singing together as one remembered truth. Until then, the stars continue to shine, the earth continues to turn, and somewhere within us, the oldest memory of all continues to whisper, "You have been here before. You will be here again." Nothing is ever truly lost, because we are not the witnesses of the universe. We are its memory, and memory, by its nature, never ends.